Hey friends, they tell the famous story how in Moscow, December 91, an old Jewish man walks into a cafe and he sits down and he orders a coffee, a roll, and he asks for a copy of the Pravda newspaper. The waiter returns with the coffee and the roll, but no newspaper. He says, sorry, the Soviet regime has fallen and the Pravda is no longer being published. So the next day the man returns and again he orders a coffee, a roll, and the Pravda. And again, the waiter returns, coffee and roll in hand. But no Pravda. Sorry, he repeats, they just don't print this paper anymore. So on the third day, the man comes back and yet again he sits down, he orders a coffee and a roll and the Pravda. This time, the waiter loses his patience and he goes, I don't understand. What's the matter with you, he demands. I already told you, there's no more Soviet government and there's no Pravda. Why do you keep badgering me and asking me daily for this newspaper? He goes, the Jew replied, I just can't get enough of hearing you say it, that the Soviet regime has fallen and the Pravda is no longer being published. Friends, this week we read in the Torah, Torah portion of the week, the story of Moshe and Aaron, Moses and Aaron's repeated visits to Pharaoh and his palace for an entire year. Moshe and Aaron, they try every trick of diplomacy to convince Pharaoh to let the Jewish people go. They use sticks, they use carrots, they use threats, they use promises, and ultimately force in the form of the famous 10 plagues, the likes of which the world has never seen. But Moshe and Aaron, they really weren't career diplomats who enjoyed walking the halls of the United Nations. They were not like the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken or anyone of his like, for whom shuttle diplomacy is an enjoyable art form. To the contrary, we can assume that every time Moshe and Aaron went to the palace and meet the king, they couldn't wait for the meeting to be over. Because to be in Pharaoh's palace was to be not only the capital of the Egyptian government, but the capital of the Egyptian spirit and the way of life. And this place was a grand temple of all the world's idols and evil, the unholiest, lowliest spiritual place on earth. Indeed, Rashi, the famous commentary, tells us the capital city and certainly the place itself were so saturated with impurity that whenever Moshe wanted to pray to God, he had to leave the city. And yet, this is the place to which God sends him and his brother Aaron again and again to try to reckon with this stubborn king. I mean, think, why send two holy, righteous men, tzaddikim, into the spiritual lion's den? And God had already told Moshe, at the time of the burning bush we read, God says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and the king of Egypt will not let you go. From the outset, it was quite clear that God removed Pharaoh's ability to make rational decisions. And that whatever Moshe would say, Pharaoh was guaranteed to always be the same, saying, no, I will not let the Jewish people go. And yet, as the story unfolds, the more Pharaoh watched his kingdom crumble from plagues after plagues, the more stubborn he became in his refusal. So why make Moshe and Aaron spend all that energy to flog the dead horse? Why take them from their natural habitat, teaching Torah in their yeshiva, in their study hall, and have them journey to the core of profanity? What was the purpose of this exercise? Another related question. Rashi, the famous commentary, explains that between each of the 10 plagues, there was actually a 3-week period during which Moshe would be testifying and warning Pharaoh about the next plague to come. In other words, on the one hand, he would testify about the plague that was coming, and he advised him exactly what the plague would do and how devastating it would be, Moses would tell Pharaoh. For example, before the plague of blood, Moshe told Pharaoh, now, you have not listened until now, and behold, with my staff in my hand, I will strike upon the water of the Nile, that is the river, and it will become blood. And not only did Moshe testify what's going to happen, he warned Pharaoh. And a warning means if, for example, when it came to the plague of frogs, Moshe said, if you refuse to send them, then I will strike your entire territory with frogs, implying that the plagues isn't guaranteed to come. It really depends on you. Means Paro, make your right choice and you will be spared. But you may ask, how could that be? If God hardened Pharaoh's heart, how could Moshe say that the plague's execution depends on Pharaoh's decisions? Because even if he wanted to, Pharaoh couldn't have sent the people. Even if he wanted to, it seems he had no power to avert the plagues. So why did Moshe keep coming to him and give him this choice? So the classic answer is that this is the part of Pharaoh's punishment for his crimes against the Jewish people. First, God removed Pharaoh from the most precious and divine human attribute. That means, what did he remove from Pharaoh? He removed his free will and free power to make his own choice. Having so cruelty enslaved the Jewish people, murdered their babies, and literally bathed in their blood, it was decreed that Pharaoh become enslaved in his wicked ways. It means he was bound in the prison of the person he became without the opportunity to free himself by changing his way, even if he wanted to. Additionally, part of his punishment was a sort really of mocking of Paro, pretending as if he is in charge of his own house. As we read in the beginning of the portion, God says, "Come to Pharaoh, because I hardened his heart, so that you will relate in the errors of your children and grandchildren." You're going to say in the future how I mocked Egypt. Okay, no. While perhaps a technically sound answer, it's a good answer. It's really hard to accept that God sent Moshe, the greatest of all Jewish leaders and the holiest of men, again and again and again to Pharaoh solely for the purpose of humiliating and mocking him, giving us a good story to tell our children and grandchildren. What's really going on over here? So, like everything in the Torah, and indeed in the world, there's actually something deeper at play here. Something under the surface. A powerful, profound lesson. As the Rebbe explains in Likutei Sichos, Volume 6, Moshe's dialogue with Pharaoh in the palace is more than just a story of a stubborn king falling deeper and deeper into a mess of his own making. It's actually the story of the human spirit and of the faith God has in every single person, even in a person like Pharaoh. A person that took his life so far from the image of God in which he was created. Because when Moshe came to Pharaoh and he warned him, he said, "Change your ways." The Rebbe explains, Moshe wasn't out to mock Pharaoh, but he wanted to give Pharaoh an opportunity. Because the point wasn't to show Pharaoh what a dismal failure he was, but really just the opposite. Don't think you are a lost cause, Moshe told him. Don't listen to those voices telling you that you're doom and gloom, because all hope is not lost. It is true that God already hardened Pharaoh's heart. It is true that Pharaoh's hands were tied behind his back. And it is true that God pronounced that the king of Egypt will not allow you to go. But that is just the point. No matter how stuck a person is, there is no force in the world that can completely chain that human spirit. Because every human being is created in the image of God. And there lies a spark of infinity deep within. By nature, a person has an untamable, revolutionary fire band lurking within that really cannot and will not be subjugated by the limits of any circumstances. It's really a kernel of inherent divine goodness, and therefore it really can overcome anything, even the confines imposed by God himself. The wisest man of all time was King Solomon. And he said that the soul of man is a candle of God. What does it mean? Take a candle, light it, and turn it on the side, bend it downwards. Whatever you do, one thing is, the flame is always finding its way upwards, even when the candle is upside down. And no force in the world can change that. And that's what Moshe was reminding Paro. So long as there's a breath of life within you, you can find your way back up. And it's not just that you can change if you want to, but that precisely because you have fallen so low, you are at the crossroads of a unique and powerful opportunity. As someone who has committed such great evil, who has become so obsessed and addicted to evil as to literally, basically stuck in it, you are the one who can change the world by showing the world what real teshuvah looks like, what is real repentance. You, Paro, are the one who can demonstrate how a person can not only do better, but really reveal evil itself and show the world that even in the darkest place there's God. And therefore, even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil because you, God, are with me, as quoted in Psalm 23. A sinner may think, okay, you know what? I could come back. But what for? What is there really left to redeem? What do I have left to contribute to the world? After falling so low, even if I pick myself up, how high can I really get from there? But this thinking is flawed. And the truth is otherwise. Because spiritual decline is not an end, but really a means to an end. And the very fact of being stuck in the mud comes with a lofty mission. Know that if you find yourself in the nether parts of the world, you are an empowered person. You know why? Because a Baal Teshuvah, someone who repents, could do something that even the perfect righteous man, a tzaddik, can do. Because he has the power to pick up the broken, shattered pieces of reality and demonstrate that they too have a God within them. And that they too, even the evil of the evil, when he becomes a Baal Teshuvah, he repents, he's part of a divine reality. Because a person must know that it is precisely from the depths of the spirit that redemption is born. In the times of the famous Hasidic master, the Baal Shem Tov, there was a man who became very ill. And he was on his deathbed, and his families rushed to the tzaddik in Mezhebush in the city in White Russia. And he said, Baal Shem Tov, Holy Master, please pray for their father who was ill. The Baal Shem Tov closed his eyes in meditation. And to everyone's great surprise, he says, do me a favor, quickly. I want you to bring all the thieves in this town and bring them here. Sure enough, the thieves were summoned. And the Baal Shem Tov, the Holy Master, began to recite the Tehillim. And he said, Lord in heaven, please heal this man. And he was engulfed in his tense feeling of concentration that even the thieves that were with him were swept up in a wave of repentance with the holy man's prayer. Shortly after, a messenger came from the man's home who was ill. He says, the crisis passed. He's going to survive. The Baal Shem Tov's students turned to him in an explanation. He says, clearly your prayers works, but why did you need all those thieves around you? And the Baal Shem Tov said something so profound. He said, I really try to pray on my own, but I saw the gates of heavens were shut, bolted shut. And I knew there's really nothing that I can do. But there's only one hope that was left. And that was to summon those who know how to break those locks. Those are the thieves. Along similar lines, the rabbis of different rabbis of Chabad explained a famous question about the story of a man in the Talmud called Acher. Who was this man? He was once upon a time a great holy sage. He was one of the brightest of his day, one of the greatest people who wrote the Mishnah, the oral law. He was so famous that when he would speak, even the high priest, the holy high priest, would be silent to listen to him. Yet, tragically, this man left the paths of Judaism and he began the life of sin. And they called him Acher, which means the other one. He had a student, a famous student who was named Rabbi Meir of the Mishnah. When his student Acher left the study halls of yeshiva and he became corrupted and everyone gave up on him, only his student Rabbi Meir said, I'm going to follow him. And the story goes that it was one Shabbat afternoon, Rabbi Meir was walking with his former teacher who became a sinner, Acher, and all of a sudden the teacher turns to him, he says, Meir, stop. You can't go further. It's Shabbat. You're not allowed to walk this far on Shabbat. Rabbi Meir was surprised. All of a sudden, this man who became an apostate, who became a sinner, shows concern for the religious observance of Shabbat. So he thought maybe this is an opening into his teacher's heart, and he turned to his teacher, and he says, fine, I will stop walking because it's Shabbat, but you also should stop walking. You're also of the Jewish faith. Acher said, no. He insisted there's no use of it. He says, there's no way for me to come back and observe. He says, why? Because I heard a heavenly voice that says, everyone can repent, everyone can do teshuvah, all sinners can come back home except Acher. That is me, he tells his teacher, Rabbi. He tells his student. He says, to me, I sinned even though I was a great man, but all the gates in heaven are closed. That's what I heard. Friends, could Acher, after hearing that voice from heaven stating that he will never be forgiven, be thought otherwise? I mean, why should he want to do tshuva? Maybe we really can't hold him accountable for attempting to do something which he had no chance of doing, if he heard that there's no place for him in heaven. And Chassidus teaches us a very powerful answer. And it says that a scholar as great as Acher should have known that a Jew has an infinite connection to God that transcends everything. And therefore he cannot allow himself to be intimidated by anything, not even a heavenly voice telling him he's a lost cause. Because Acher should have remembered that there's a rule in the Talmud that says, Kol ma shabala bayis omer lecha aseh chutz mitzeh, which means whatever your host tells you to do, you are to listen, unless he tells you to leave. What does that mean? It means, in literal sense, that the spiritual messages, that the master of the house is God, the King of the universe. And whatever he tells us to do, we must obey. But there's one command we can't listen to, that if the master tells you to leave, when a father tells his child that it's over and he's no longer welcome here, the son who's truly connected understands that what the father really wants is for their son to start coming home, not to leave. So Acher's sin was that he forgot that God, his father, wants him to come back home. He defined himself as a sinner and no more, but he forgot that there's a difference between sin and a sinner. He failed to recognize that when heaven itself calls out to tell you you're a lost cause and it's too late, it can only mean one thing, that the path of return beckons. It's up to you, but you can and you must do it. Friends, this theme is actually illustrated by a following beautiful story of a Gentile, despite all of his errors, was able to see himself a continued mission to pick himself up and make a real change in his life and in the lives of so many others. The story is told about the Chabad rabbi in Vienna, Rabbi Yaakov Biederman. He's the Chabad rabbi in Vienna, Austria. And many years ago, he had a small little Jewish day school. It was bursting at its seams and he needed more room for the students. There were more families who wanted to sign up their kids for the school, but he had to refuse them. He had no place. So Rabbi Biederman, he turned to the famous philanthropist, Ronald Lauder, from the Estee Lauder Foundation, who he served as the American ambassador to Austria. And Mr. Lauder agreed to partner with Rabbi Biederman in finding a larger facility for the school. Mr. Lauder actually pledged to fund the large campus for the community needs with one condition. He said, I will pay for this new school building as long as the building is in a central, prominent location so that everybody that comes to Vienna will see it and that anyone that is looking for it could find it easily. So they hired great, prestigious architects in Europe to design this gorgeous campus. The only problem was they had to find the right spot. They received a call from someone in the city management one day who said, we know of a beautiful park in the Vienna 2nd District that actually, a long time ago, belonged to the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph. And at the edge of this park was a plot of land that belonged to the Jewish community before World War II. And it actually served as a quarantine quarter for Jewish children stricken with tuberculosis, which was an illness at that time, during World War II and before. And when the Nazis took power, they burnt down the building to the ground with all its occupants inside. And now the lot is sitting empty. He says, you know what? That would be a beautiful place for make a Jewish school. Rabbi Biederman thought the idea of using a plot of land that once served Jewish children, this would be the perfect place to make a school. So a meeting was arranged with the mayor of Vienna, and a deal was reached. And the community signed a 99-year lease for this property for the purpose of building a Jewish school upon it. Friends, but that's when problems started. The local Green Party was against taking a piece of a beautiful park, one of the nicest spots in the city of Vienna, and handing it over to the Jews? No. So they started a smear campaign alleging that the Jews had bribed the mayor to win this agreement to the plan, and signs went up all over the city protesting this project. And there was protests that stood on the streets. They collected signatures against this. And almost immediately, the plan was shelved at City Hall. And there was nothing that Rabbi Biederman can do. The mayor, he wouldn't even pick up the phone. He had the money. He had the plans. And Rabbi Biederman had children ready to sign up for Jewish education. But now, it was all in limbo. And that's when Rabbi Biederman remembered that he forgot one important step. He forgot to write the Rebbe's Ohel for a blessing, describing the situation and asking a blessing from the Rebbe. He stopped whatever he was doing and he sat down, closed his eyes, thought about it, and he wrote a letter explaining the situation he's in, and he needed a blessing. Friends, 3 days later, he receives a phone call from a Jew named Leoni Zalman. He was the well-known head of a Jewish institution. And Mr. Zalman explained that he's sitting next to Hans Dischand, who wasn't Jewish. He was the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Kronen Zeitung, the most widely known newspaper in Austria. 3.5 million readers out of a population of 7 million people read this paper. And Mr. Dischand would like to meet you, says Mr. Zalman to Rabbi Biederman. The next day, Mr. Dischand arrived at Rabbi Biederman's office and he shared the following story. He says, Rabbi Biederman, 40 years ago in the early 50s, we published an anti-Semitic article in the paper. It was a full-on article against the Jewish community. And he says, Rabbi, this has been bothering me for years. I'm already past 80 years old, and I don't want to finish my life with this on my chest. I want to know, what can I do to fix my evil doing of writing that evil anti-Semitic article against Jews? Rabbi Biederman was silent. After all, he's a rabbi. He's not accustomed to taking confessions. He had an idea. He said the European newspapers are constantly reporting anti-Israel articles with blatantly biased anti-Israel slant. He said, Mr. Dischand, why don't you use your position to push for more balanced, honest reporting? The editor agreed. But 2 weeks later, he was back at the rabbi's office. He goes, Rabbi, I don't feel I'm doing enough. After all, when I wrote an anti-Semitic article against the Jews, it was a local article against this local Vienna community. I want to do something that will directly benefit the local Jewish community here in Vienna. Suddenly, Rabbi Biederman realized an idea. He goes, my God, this is the solution to the problem. And he told Mr. Dischand, the editor, how he had a school that needed a new building. And how the community reached an agreement with the city of Vienna. And they had a plot of land. And the mayor was about to give it, but there was local opposition that put an end to the plan. Perhaps Mr. Dischand could actually use his influence of the newspaper to revive the plan for the benefit of local Jewish children. Friend, the editor didn't even wait 1 minute. And as soon as he heard about it, he rushed out of the rabbi's office and he got to work. The very next day, the headlines appeared in the paper as follows: who would fight children? The next day and the following day, the headline said, children and trees should grow together. And so it was. Day after day, articles appeared in support of the new Jewish school going up at the edge of the park, until finally, one day, a short while later, the mayor phones Rabbi Biederman. And when all was said and done, the entire city council, including members of the Green Party, voted in favor of the Louder Education Campus. It is the largest campus for education of Jewish children in Europe until today. Friends, this weekend is the Shabbat before Yud Shvat, which is a very holy day. It is the anniversary of the passing of the previous Rebbe and the date that the Rebbe became Rebbe. He took his leadership. And it's fitting to share a message that the previous Rebbe shared with his disciples in Russia, published in a book called Abba. And it says as follows, that it was in the trying times of Soviet persecution, the Chabad community was relentlessly hounded by the KGB. This is in the 1930s. And there were many Hasidic men, including my great-grandfather, who were arrested for their crimes. Many lost their lives simply for keeping the flame of Judaism alive. Some of them were shipped to Siberia like my wife's grandfather, and in some cases never to be seen again, or shot by a firing squad like my great-grandfather. Stalin, the leader, was ruthless. He left Chabad families uprooted from their homes and previous lives, and they were deeply shaken. And the previous Rebbe writes, many had miraculously escaped Russia and found themselves on the other side of the Iron Curtain in displaced person camps in Germany, including my mother, who was born in a displaced people camp in Austria. And many of these were unsure how to proceed. And many of these Hasidim turned to the previous Rebbe for guidance and direction. What does God want from us? What is our mission? What's the plan? What's going to be? And the previous Rebbe responded with a brief handwritten note, which he requested to be shared with all of his students, his disciples, his Hasidim, and he said as follows: each of you is precious to me in his body and his soul, for this is my comfort in the present and my hope in the future. He wrote, the hour, however, dictates that we are required to engage in act of kindness, and that each one of you should fulfill his mandated responsibility. He says, Chazak, be strong, and with God's desire in your heart, you will succeed materially and spiritually. And friends, I'm here today to tell you the story, as my wife and I, descendants are many of these Hasidim. Friends, the Rebbe's words are relevant today as they were then. We don't pick the part of our life. We don't pick the path that our life takes us. We all have some type or some time or place that we'd rather be. But this hour, however, dictates that we are required to engage in acts of kindness. We have to strengthen our faith. And wherever a person is right now, whichever hours it is right now, no matter how dark or gloomy things may seem, he must remember he's here with a mission. Friends, inside of you is an internal, unwavering, inexhaustible spark of God, given to you for the purpose of revealing divinity everywhere and anywhere you go and in all that you do, even when it seems dark. It is within you, it is within us, that this recognition, that we recognize this, that we have that strength and the clarity and to fulfill this responsibility to its fullest, and nothing will get in the way. And it was upon Moshe and Aaron in Egypt, and they succeeded. And just as it was upon our grandfathers, some made it out, some didn't, and they succeeded. And it is this hour now that we are required to engage in acts of kindness and create life, even when it's difficult and even when the world is so dark. This is the mandated responsibility and the call of the moment. And everything else is irrelevant. Everything else will only be elevated by the fulfillment of our mandate. So friends, I bless you all to merit that you find your success in your mandated mission in a manner of revealed good in this physical world. Let no challenge get in your way. Think of the call of the moment, the call of the hour. Know that God is with you. And there's nothing that stands in the way of the will of man. And just like Pharaoh, his heart was hardened. But God gave him the chance, but he didn't take it. God didn't close the door for Acher. He didn't make it easy, but he didn't take it. But he told his student, don't let the opportunity slip. Friends, don't let this opportunity slip when things seem dark in this world, globally, in the micro and the macro. Don't let that challenge stop you. Be like Moses and Aaron. Be resilient. Go forward. Know that God is holding your hand in that moment of challenge. When you do your part, God will do his part. You will experience your own personal redemption. And may we all merit to experience the ultimate merit, the tzchus of the coming of Mashiach. May it happen speedily in our days now. Shalom. May God be with you every moment of the day and the night in your personal life. And may you see the light at the end of the tunnel. Shalom for now.